Hi, and welcome to Introduction to Linguistics. In this video, we are going to have a look at the International Phonetic Alphabet, the speech organs, and the consonants. So let's start with the IPA. The IPA is a set of symbols that provide you with a notional standard for the phonetic representation of all the different languages in the world. By using these symbols, you can transcribe the pronunciation of a given word. You can either do that in terms of a phonemic transcription, where you only write the necessary information about the pronunciation. For example, here in the case of the word ring or till, you see that we only provide the information about the three phonemes that are used in this word, sort of the R sound, the E sound, and the N sound. Similarly for the word till. We use the slashes to tell that this is the phonemic, the very broad transcription. But we can also include more details about the pronunciation of a given word. This is then called the phonetic transcription. And based on the amount of details that we include, we can either have a very narrow phonetic transcription, where we really include all the different details about the pronunciation. For example, how the T in till is aspirated, or what type of L is really used in the word till. Or we can also go for a more broader phonetic description where we include some details, but not all of them. Right, for example, in the word ring, we don't really include all the information about the sound E, but we do say what type of an R sound it is, that it is the sound and not the R sound or R sound. In any case, if we go for the phonetic transcription, we use square brackets to do that. And in order to be able to include all the different details about the pronunciation of different words, the IPA has a set of diacritics that we can use for that. If you're going to transcribe or read English IPA transcription, you will probably not see all of them, but some of them definitely. Right, so let's move on to the speech organs. So what is the physiological basis of our speech? How do we actually produce the sounds that we use to communicate with other people? So firstly, it's important to say that humans don't really have any primary speech organs, right? So all the organs that we use in order to speak are primarily used for something else, right? So for example, our lungs are primarily used for breathing, or our teeth are used for biting, but not for speaking. At the same time, they can be used to speak. We also use muscles in order to produce speech sounds, and also air movement, right? So the air goes either from the lungs and leaves our body, or it goes the other way around. And then this is called those are the ingressive sounds, where we inhale, and by inhaling produce sounds. These sounds are very infrequent and not used in English, only in several languages of the world. We also use cavities, the oral or nasal cavity or the larynx, in order to produce the sounds. And we use these cavities as resonation spaces. Right. And if we now have a look at the vocal tract, so the part of the parts that we use to speak above the larynx, we'll see that we have two cavities, the nasal and the oral cavity. We have two lips, right? Teeth. Then there is the alveolar ridge right behind our teeth, the palate, the soft and hard palate, the uvula, the tongue, of course, and then in the larynx then are vocal cords, or vocal folds sometimes. So the vocal cords are located in the larynx, and they are either close together and then they vibrate, which produces voiced consonants. We'll see about that in a second. Or they are not close together and they don't vibrate, and thus producing voiceless sounds. Right. And in order for you to have a more concrete idea of how it looks like when we speak, I'll show you a short video where you can see actually in real time how the different speech organs move when somebody talks. So this little story about a grandfather is here documented, and you will now be able to see how it looks like.
You wish to know all about my grandfather. Well, he is nearly 93 years old, yet he still thinks as swiftly as ever. He dresses himself in an old black frock coat, usually several buttons missing. A long beard clings to his chin, giving those who observe him a pronounced feeling of the utmost respect. When he speaks, his voice is just a bit cracked and quivers a bit. Twice each day he plays skillfully and with zest upon a small organ. Except in the winter when the snow or ice prevents, he slowly takes a short walk in the open air each day. We have often urged him to walk more and smoke less, but he always answers, "Banana oil." Grandfather likes to be modern in his language.
All right. So now let's have a look at how we can describe the consonants. The distinction between consonants and vowels is a basic one. Right? So every language has vowels, sounds such as a, o, or the like, and also consonants, sounds such as p, or t, or k. And the difference between these two big groups is that consonants are produced by obstructing the airflow, whereas vowels do not have any obstruction of the airflow. And if we talk about consonants, if we want to describe consonants, there are three questions that we have to ask ourselves. The first thing is, where does the obstruction of the airflow happen? This would be the place of articulation. The second question is, how does this obstruction happen? This describes the manner of articulation. And next on, the question is, what do the vocal cords do during the obstruction? This then enables us to describe the voicing of the consonant. Is the consonant voiced or voiceless? Right, so the question of where can be described as follows. Right, so either we use the lips or lips and teeth in order to produce an obstruction, and in that case we have either the bilabial or labiodental vowels, bilabial or labiodental consonants. So bilabial are produced by using both lips. That produces the sounds p, b, m, and w. And labiodental by using lips and teeth to produce the sounds f or v, right? If we only use teeth in English, we get the interdental consonants th or the. Then there is the alveolar ridge right behind our teeth. If the obstruction happens there, we produce the so-called alveolar consonants t, d, n, s, z, l, r. If the obstruction happens towards the back of the mouth, in the palate or in the area behind the alveolar ridge towards the palate, we get the so-called post-alveolar consonants, sh, j, ch, and j, right here. We also have consonants that are produced even further back in the mouth at the hard palate. This would then be a palatal consonant, in English, y. Here. Then consonants produced at the soft palate, the so-called velar, are the velar sounds k, g, and n. And lastly, we can also produce consonants by means of the glottis. Right, so here, those are the sounds h and the glottal stop. Right, but knowing where the obstruction happens is not enough to identify consonants, right? Because the following consonants are produced in the same place, but they do differ, right? So t and s are produced at the same place, but they are distinct. The same goes for b and m, or z and n. And they differ in the manner of articulation, so how the obstruction happens. And how the obstruction happens enables us to differentiate between the following categories of consonants. We either have the plosives or stops, where the airflow is completely stopped, or we have the so-called fricatives, where the airflow is not stopped completely and there is only a very small opening through which air can flow freely, and that creates friction, right? Then we have affricates, which is a combination of plosives and fricatives, right? It is a stop followed directly by a fricative, right? So t as a plosive, sh as a fricative, together ch. The same goes for j. Then we also have nasals, which are produced not in the oral cavity, but by letting the air flow through our nasal cavity. And then we also have approximants, sounds that are created by only not closing off our mouth completely, but by two speech organs approaching each other, but not as closely as in the case of fricatives. This would be w, r, y, and l. Now we'll do the same thing as you've already seen. Let's have a look at how plosives look like if we use this video, right? So, and look at how the airflow is obstructed and where.
IPA. IPA.
Right, so the sound p. Then there are fricatives, which describe, as I said, a narrow opening, which is almost a closure, which produces a friction.
Ada.
Right, the sound the.
Ada.
Affricates, as you know, a combination of a plosive and a fricative.
Aja.
The sound j.
Aja. Aja. Aja.
Nasals, where the sound is not produced in the not in the oral cavity, but in the nasal cavity.
Ama.
The sound m.
Ama.
Now an approximant, which, as you know, the articulators are close to each other, not as close as in the case of fricatives.
Aya.
y, right?
Aya.
And then lastly, we also have the criterion of voicing, right? So what do the vocal cords do when we obstruct the airflow? If they are close to each other, as we see in the bottom image, they start to vibrate and they make a voiced sound, right? And this can describe the difference between the consonants, for example, pin and bin, right? P sound is voiceless, b is voiced. Pin, bin. The same goes for sip and zip, right? S, z. And whereas consonants can sometimes be voiced and sometimes voiceless, vowels, on the other hand, are always voiced. Right? Another sort of secondary criterion is also the nasality, right? Sounds can either be oral or nasal, based on what cavity is used for the airflow, either the nasal cavity or the oral cavity, right? And in the case of the consonants and n, the nasal cavity is used. So, if we sum up, we know that letters are sounds, and if we want to transcribe sounds, the pronunciation of a word, we have to use the IPA, right, the International Phonetic Alphabet. What we've done in this video is to introduce you to the English consonant inventory, and we've also talked about the features that enable us to describe English consonants, or any consonants for that matter. And that is the place of articulation, where the obstruction of the airflow happens, manner of articulation, how this obstruction happens, and the voicing, meaning what do the vocal cords do while the obstruction happens. Right, so this is the overview of the English consonants using the International Phonetic Alphabet. Right, English consonants. Here are some useful links that you can use while studying the English consonants. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.